All right, hello everybody. So today I have what I think is going to be the first remake of a video I already did. So I posted in the not too distant past a video about, and don't worry about what I'm doing right now, a video about how to do the corrector tuning, okay, the probe corrector tuning. And the essence of that video was correct. Okay, but there were a few too many errors in there and important points that I did not properly communicate. Okay, and I want to make sure that I'm giving people good information and correct information, and I'm helping people out the best that I can. And since I did that video, there were some things that I learned as well that have made it more effective, okay, and getting it done. So I'm going to redo this video um, and make sure I cover those things as well, okay. So I already have the gold cross grading or gold palladium cross grading sample in here. Technically speaking, you could use any kind of particulate sample that gives good contrast. So, it doesn't have to be the cross grading, but this is kind of the standard sample for doing this. Okay. I already have the sample at eccentric position, or I'm a little bit off here. No, we're not too far off. I'm actually a little too high in mag here for this. All right, so I'm a little bit off here. Okay. So this is being set with the wobbler. Of course, the other way you can do this, kind of the standard way, of course, is you press eccentric focus. Okay. And you focus with the Z. Now, when we get into stem mode, we are going to have to deviate from this a little bit. Okay. And I will discuss that when the time arrives. Okay. So again, you're looking for minimum contrast here, right about here. Okay. All right. We'll switch. Now we'll leave this in natural mode for the time being. Okay. So, so the setting for the gun here is not critical for doing the corrector tuning, okay? Because when we get to setting up the stem condition for doing the tuning, it's not like a super high resolution condition, okay? So the gun setting is not terribly critical for doing this. Because we have the monochromator with the XFEG, though, the kind of the standard practice for using that for doing stem is to, if we go to the, and I don't have it here because it's being cropped out because of the screen resolution. So if I find it over here, monochromator tune, is to set this focus to about positive 40. Okay, so this is off a little bit right now. Okay, so I do have a FEG register saved for this, which is specifically for nanoprobe mode, which is what we use when we do stem mode. Okay, typically, although it's not to say you can't do stem in microprobe mode, but obviously when you're doing corrector tuning, you're doing it in nanoprobe mode. Okay, but anyways, to show how we can do this manually. So right now I'm in TEM, which means I have all three of my condenser lenses on. Okay, so what I have to do is turn off my C3 lens. Okay. And actually, we're going to leave this off for a couple things here first. Okay, so now I'm using my intensity knob to control C2. I'm expanding clockwise from crossover here. Okay, and now I need to find my monochromator tune panel, wherever that is, activate focus and shift, using my intensity knob to change the focus. And then you can see here, we're not kind of centered, so there's going to be some drift, obviously, with time. I haven't messed with this since yesterday. And now we can use the shift knobs to center inside of the aperture rim. Okay. Right. And we can then increase this to approximately 40. And we can make a tweak with this later when we're dialing in the current because we have a monochromator with an XFEG. If you don't, you would have to potentially compensate for that by changing spot size. But again, there's several different configurations here for the gun. Okay, but this is what we have on here. So we have this set approximately to 40. We have it centered, so we're good now for the gun. Okay. All right. Next thing is C2 aperture centering. Okay. So now, if we find the apertures panel, which I have here in Tune. Oh, let me take this guy out. Obviously, we don't want the objective aperture in here while we're doing this. Okay. You want to check centering of the C2 aperture with the C3 lens off. Okay. And starting with the 70 is fine. We're going to switch this when we set this up for doing the corrector tuning, okay, because kind of the standard practice is that we actually will use the 50 here. So I guess if we wanted to start by putting this in at the 50, we could, because we're going to end up doing that anyway, so I guess we might as well do that, just kind of to keep this consistent. And now what I have found with this microscope is that if you center in TEM mode with the C3 lens off, okay, if you center the C2 aperture in TEM mode with the C3 lens off, that this centering is also valid in STEM mode, and we will not need to worry about it again when we get back into STEM, okay? So I'm not too high of a mag here. This is just, 13 to 20,000-ish will work fine for this, okay? And I'm going back and forth, again, clockwise from crossover, and that looks perfect, okay? So we're good, okay? All right, so this aperture is centered. We will be changing this aperture size as part of the tuning, but we have it centered to start with, okay? All right, and let's see, is there anything else we need to discuss before we go into STEM mode? I don't believe so, okay? Let's see. No, I don't think so. All right, so we are going to find the STEM tab and then STEM imaging. We are going to hit the STEM button. Okay, and let me turn this off here. Switch to natural mode. Okay, actually, it doesn't matter here. I could have done this when I was in, but okay, again, I still have the C3 lens off, so you could have done this while you were still in TEM mode, but we can go back to the beam tab, and then since we're now in STEM, we want to click probe here, okay? So we turn the C3 lens back on, okay? Okay. All right, so we have all three of these lenses off. Now, the default with the 50 micron C2 aperture actually should be 17.86, and that is the recommended angle for doing the tuning, okay? It's 17.86 milliradians. So if it's not already set to that, okay, you can just click MFY convergence angle and then dial it in right there, okay? And now we have the convergence angle set to what it needs to be. Okay. The spot size. So again, because we have the monochromator with the XFEG, we can just use spot size 9, and we can dial in the current by modulating the focus here. If you don't have the ability to do that, you would have to change the spot size to something that will give you the appropriate amount of current. So again, the amount of current that we're typically working with to do the tuning is around 200 picoamps, somewhere in the vicinity of that. Doesn't have to be perfectly that, okay? 200 to 150, somewhere in there, you should be able to find a spot size that will give that to you, okay? If we want to try that by just modifying the spot size, just, for the sake of argument here, right? So we're seeing right now, we're getting about 11 picoamps, okay? So every time I increase the spot number, I should roughly double the current. So if we do a little math, we go 10, 20, 40. So we go 10, 20, 40, 80. So I think if we do 4, we should get, okay, so that's a little too high. All right, so let me go back to 5. Okay, so now this is a reasonable current to use for the tuning, okay? So yeah, so we go 20, 40, 80. Yep, all right, so my math was off. Yeah, so but that's basically every time you double the spot or increase the spot size, you're gonna double the current roughly, okay? All right, so we can go ahead and use this, and we are all set there. All right, what's my camera length? My camera length is 115. All right, so for alignment purposes here, I'm going to increase this to something a lot bigger, okay? So let's put it up at 360 for the time being. And when we go to do the actual stem, of course, we will, set that back, okay? Okay, and now I'm going to turn diffraction off so we can look at an image of the probe. And somebody left this rotation on. It's not really important here, but I'm going to turn that off anyway. All right, so I'm pushing diffraction on my right-hand panel. And we are going to see an image of the probe. So I'm going to mag out here till I can kind of see it a little better. We'll switch to HDR mode. Okay. All right. So now, here is where this gets really important and where I kind of dropped the ball last time. Okay. All the changes that we are making to the probe here, okay, we have to make all of those tweaks with a couple exceptions, okay, through S-Core, okay, and not the UI. Okay, everything has to be done through S-Core here. Okay, so we're basically keeping the microscope stationary and we're doing all the changes through S-Core. And this was something that I didn't properly grasp when I did this previously. Okay, all right. And then the other thing as well is we have to make sure that we have certain settings in the UI zeroed out before we start making any adjustments in S-Core. Okay, and this is fairly easy to do. Okay, so if you go to the stem auto tuning panel, if you have this, you can expand it and click reset here. Okay, so this resets the A1, A2, B2 deflectors in the UI. C1 is just a focus, so that may or may not change, but you can click this here. Okay, and that resets it. So yeah, so basically it put my objective lens back to the default value. Okay, and now if I find, okay, here's my stigmator panels here. So if I click condenser, you can see this is zeroed, probe A1 is zeroed, and probe B2 is also zeroed, okay? The objective one doesn't matter as far as doing probe corrector tuning, okay? All right, so we're good there. Now, beam shift and beam tilt in the UI, okay? This is critical that you have these zeroed out before you do any of the tuning, okay? And now the way you make sure that these are zeroed out is we have to go to S-Core here. Okay, so we have S-Core open, and this is a little tricky because I only have one screen, but you click on, where is it? I'll find it, I swear. Channels, there we go. Okay, channels, okay? And right here where you see beam tilt and beam shift, these need to be zeroed out before you start the tuning, okay? And these get zeroed out using beam shift and beam tilt in direct alignments, okay? So I'm going to click beam shift. And now I'm going to use my multi-functions here to get me back to 0 milliamps. Now don't worry if the beam gets off the screen here because we're going to, fix that in a second, okay? But we get that to 0. Do the same thing with Y. Supposedly there was just a button you could click for this, but I couldn't find it actually. So, you just do it manually, okay? Very easy, okay? Click done. Do the same thing with beam tilt, okay? And again, we're going to use our multi-functions and we're going to set this guy to 0 for the X. And we're going to set it to 0 for the Y, okay? So if those are, now those weren't off by a whole lot, okay, to begin with. So it probably wouldn't have been very problematic. But if those are too high to begin with, okay, what I've noticed is that when you go back into TEM mode, your beam is going to look weird, okay? And this was something that I didn't understand for the longest time. But when we were back in TEM mode with all three of our condenser lenses on, the beam always looked really, really astigmatic, okay? And I could never figure out why. But then I did this, I zeroed these out, I did the tuning, and I came back, and it was like, oh my God, the beam actually looked normal, okay? And this was why, okay? It was mainly because of this. These have to be zeroed out when you do the tuning, okay? Or at least very, very close to zero. Again, they were not off that much to begin with, um, but if they are off by a lot, this can actually throw off the rest of your alignments for the entire microscope, okay? So we are good to go here now. We'll click done. All right, and now we're gonna come back to, where is it here? Is it service? No, not this guy. State of correction. Okay, state of correction. And now all of our tweaking we're gonna do using manual correction here, this manual correction tab. And the deflectors we're going to mess with in here are specifically ATA1, which is course A1, ATB2, which is course B2, user beam shift, and beam tilt. Okay, we're not going to mess with any of the rest of these in here. Okay, so to shift the beam around, we are going to use user beam shift. Okay, this bit multiplier here, this is the strength of the adjustment. I know this is a little tricky here, so I'm going to kind of move it around. And now I use my arrow keys here on my keyboard to center the beam, okay? So now I'm using S-core to shift the beam around rather than the UI, okay? My mag right now, yeah, around 230, that'll work perfect for doing this, okay? Let me turn off the circle marks. Okay, so I have the beam centered, beam tilt, okay? And now same thing, I'm centering that caustic spot inside the diffuse area. Okay, bit multiplier 3 works good for this. So when we get to the other two, course A1 and course B2, we can mess with those again a little bit. Now notice when I'm tilting the beam, okay, that spot is not moving. And this is good. Okay, this means we have the objective lens set to the proper value. Okay. If that is moving when you're tilting the beam, that means that that is not set properly and needs to be set again. And that could be a separate video. But I will actually, hopefully, I know I have a long list of videos I'd like to do, but that could be a video in and of itself. All right, so we've got beam tilt done here really good. All right, so now we can set the C3 lens. So now we're going to actually come back to the UI, click intensity list focus, and focus the probe. Okay, just like that. Now, if the image here looks kind of astigmatic, we can use the objective stigmator here. Okay, just to kind of make this a little nicer looking. Okay, I still have intensity list focus, so we want to get that guy. Yeah, it's right about there. So you can kind of see, this outer diffuse area. So basically, when that kind of overlaps, like right about here, that's where you have good focus. Okay, so right about there. So we're good to go there. All right, so now we are going to go back to diffraction mode on, okay, on the right-hand panel. So I'm pushing diffraction on my right-hand panel. Okay, turn on my screen markings. And if you need to center this, so that's important because we're going to be doing some tweaks here, or aperture switching, I should say. And so we need to be able to reliably change the position. If you need to center this, use diffraction alignment, okay? And you can precisely center it. It wasn't too bad to begin with, okay? But I'm just going to do that anyway just to show that. Okay, so now, those of you who are familiar with how the Ronchigram works will know that we are not focused, okay? So we now have to bring the sample into focus. So yes, we are going to be deviating a small amount from eccentric height, but this is necessary so we maintain the proper lens settings, okay? All right, so I'm going to go down because I can see the sample coming towards me till I get to the blow up, okay, right about there. All right, and now I have the blow up condition, and we can also make use of, if you have a piezo controller here, when you get close, you can make use of the piezo Z. Okay, so right now I have this defaulted to piezo move Z. You can right click and set piezo move Z, and now you can actually see, right, I can focus with my multifunction Y to get the blow up condition. Okay. All right, so but you want to use the regular stage control to get yourself as close as you can first. All right, so we're good there. And now I am going to put in the biggest C2 aperture I have. And we are going to correct A1 and B2. Okay, so if this is not centered, we can go ahead and center it. And in fact, yeah, let me get it centered first. I may bump the camera length down a click here because this is a little too high. All right, let me go down one click to 285. Yeah, it's a little bit better. Okay. All right, so let's find a fresh spot here. Okay, so now you can take the focus knob and we can wobble it back and forth to find the comma-free axis, so we can see we've got some sweeping kind of going up and down here. Okay, so that means that where our B2 is off. Okay, so again, I'm not deviating too far from this, but now I'm going to come back to S-core, and now I'm going to activate A2, B2, and then bit multiplier 9 works good for this. Okay, and I'm going to use, so now what I found here is actually the left-right keys adjust the up-down sweeping. I know, confusing, right? And the up-down keys adjust the left-right sweeping. So now we've kind of got left to right sweeping here. Okay, so okay, we're getting there. Nope, let me go down, down arrow. Okay, that's making it worse, so we'll go up arrow. There we go. Okay, so we're getting close there. All right, so that looks a little better. Okay, so we can actually fix this a little more. Okay, that's actually not too bad right there. Okay, so we'll leave B2 alone, and I will switch to ATA1, and you want to use 0 here for this because this is really coarse. Okay, so we'll move this over here, and the current's kind of eating the sample, but we'll make do anyway. Okay, and what we're trying to get here is something like that. Okay, and you can see now, because we've corrected A1 a little better, we're seeing a little more of that B2 there. Okay, so I'm going to come back to B2, and it should remember the bit value you had if you click on it. Okay, all right, so that's a lot better, and that's what we're looking for, is something about like this. And there's probably still a little bit of yeah, there's probably still a little B2 in there. This doesn't have to be perfect because, you know, we're going to give it to S-core here in a second when we do a C1 A1 sequence. Okay, but obviously we want this as close as we can. There we go. So now one thing I have found doing this, okay, is even though we corrected beam tilt before, I have found empirically that especially when you adjust B2, that your beam tilt here, and again, we do this through S-core, can get thrown off. Okay, so we're going to go back and we're going to do an iteration here with this. All right, this is centered. All right, really quickly, I'm going to blank the beam. I need to step aside for just a minute here. I'll be right back. All right, I apologize for that. I'm back. All right, unblank the beam. Okay, so we have the aperture back in here, the 50. I did put the 50 in, right? No, I put the 70. You want to put the 50 back in. Okay, good. All right, and now we're going to turn diffraction off, and we are going to check beam shift and beam tilt again. Switch to natural mode here. Now the beam's probably going to look astigmatic because particularly we adjusted A1, okay, or course A1. So again, if that's the case, you can just turn on the objective stigmator here and make it look nice and circular. Again, this is adjusting the image of the probe, not the actual probe shape itself. Let's push eccentric focus to make sure we go back to the right objective and C3 value. Okay, and I'm going to now, let's see here. Yep, I have this set to intensity and objective. So if you expand the stem tab, okay, and click on the focus tab here in the flap out, you want to make sure this is set to intensity and objective. What this is going to let you do is use your intensity knob to modulate C3, okay? So now if I do that, I can see here, okay, I can expand this halo here, and I can see that my beam is still maybe a little bit off here, okay? So now I open up S-Core, or I should say return to S-Core, activate beam tilt. Okay, and now again, I can use my arrow keys to dial that in a little better. Okay, and that looks pretty good right there. I can use beam shift if I want as well in S-Core to get this guy back to the center. Okay, but again, I'm not using beam shift inside the UI. Okay, or beam tilt inside the UI. I'm doing this entirely from within S-Core. All right, we're good there. Turn that off. We'll go back to the Tune tab. Let's do intensity list focus again. Yep, right about there. And done. All right. Click diffraction on. Turn on our screen markings. That's clearly not centered. Go ahead and center it. And go to the biggest aperture. I forgot to mention with the mag here, obviously we're not stem imaging, but you want to make sure this is not set to something super low. So I mean, something like this is fine. When we do the actual image collection, we're going to leave it at 225. So you could use that as a default, okay, just to make sure. but you don't want this down around like 10,000x, okay, when you do this. So you want it set to something reasonable. All right, so we can kind of see here now that clearly I have some B2 back here again. Okay, so I'm going to go back to S-core. We're going to turn on A2, B2, and I'm using my up-down keys here. All right, so it's a little tricky to do this when your sample is, we're right over a gold particle here, so I can blow this up a little bit. Something that gives kind of a strong crystalline signal can be a little tricky. But hey, it's gold, right? So that's what's going to happen. But you're trying to see, like, ideally you want it to just be amorphous, but yeah, so you can kind of see there's still a little bit. Okay, that looks pretty good right there. Move over a little bit. All right, so we can go to A2 or A1, sorry, course A1. Now I don't have to do much adjusting with this usually, okay? Okay, so that's like off by a lot here. So again, we're trying to expand this. All right, that looks pretty close right there. All right, that's not too bad. So this is close enough now that we could proceed with the correction here, or with running an A. Yeah, so we're not going to get this any better. We can't, because we don't want to use any other deflectors here. So yeah, so this is okay. I mean, we did 2 iterations, and that should be plenty here. Okay, we could do a third one if we want, but we can just leave this as is right now. All right, and I'm going to go back to the 50 micron aperture. Now, if you properly set your alignment up, then your convergence angle should be very close to this. Okay, we're talking about within like 1/10 of a milliradian. But what's a good idea to do anyway is to just verify that you actually do have, something close to this. Okay, and it's actually pretty easy to do. Okay, so once we have the aperture in and centered here, now so I'm going to bump the camera length up to camera length, I should say, to 460, something a lot higher. Okay, I'm going to push eccentric focus here. Okay, I'm going to use my diffraction alignment to center. Okay, I'm pretty close to blow up here, but I can use, let me turn this off. I can use piezo move Z to blow up a little bit better, right about there. Okay, now I'm going to use my intensity knob to focus. Well, actually, before I do that, sorry. Before I do that, I'm going to measure the radius here. Okay, so I'm clicked on the annotation. Let me do this again. Click on this annotation, the ellipse, start in the center. If you hold down shift, it will draw it as a circle. Okay. Right. And so you want to draw this so it is, right, so that's probably a little too big. Again, if you hold down shift while you modify it. All right, so that's good enough. Okay. All right. So now that we have this, I'm going to turn off the circle marks, and I'm going to use my intensity knob to focus this spot to a point. Okay, and what we have done now is we have obtained a beam that is parallel. Okay, all right, and so now I can use diffraction alignment here to make sure that I am centered. And now you can't really see it here, okay? But because it's overlapping because it's close. I'm going to move this ring out of the way. So this is the third ring right here, the third ring in the cross grading, okay? That is basically dead on with my ellipse, okay? It might be slightly inside of it, but basically it's indistinguishable, okay? So now if I go to TIA, click Help, and I go to Alphabetic Index, I click C and I want to find Calibrate and HM Beam Tilt. Okay, so this is the table here, and this will update depending on your voltage, okay? So the third ring is saying that the radius corresponds to 17.79 milliradians, okay? What we specified or we were hoping to get was 17.86. So this is basically dead on with what it should be, okay? But we've just, verified this, right, that it is, okay? If this was noticeably and measurably off, we would want to enter that in here. But since it's basically spot on, I'm going to enter this number in when I do the tuning, okay? All right, so we're good to go there. I can erase the circle. And I can use my intensity knob to get me back to the blow up condition. Okay, the other thing you could do as well is you could just push eccentric focus and that will reestablish C3 to what it was before. There might be a little no, it's pretty good right there. Okay, good. All right, so now we are almost ready to start doing some stem imaging. All right, so we're going to decrease the camera length to something that is a little more, whoops, not that low, a little more useful for doing HADF imaging, okay? So when I'm typically doing a HADF image, I will usually use 115, okay? But when I'm doing the tuning, I like to go a little bit lower to 91 now, okay? And this is a difference from the last video. So the reason for that has to do with making sure I don't get saturation of the detector, okay? So right now, I'm gonna turn this off here. Okay, so we can see this is the detector rim. Now this is not actually where the active part of the detector starts. Okay, the active part of the detector is actually in a little closer here. Okay, but what we don't want to have happen, because we're going to do this when we do the tuning, okay, the beam is going to be tilted 30 to 40 milliradians. Okay, when that happens, this disc is going to shift by that amount. Okay, if it is too magnified, you're going to end up putting part of this disc onto the scintillator, and then we're going to end up getting saturation of the detector, which we don't want, okay, because it's going to throw our imaging off. So by using 91 millimeters, we ensure, because this is smaller, that we don't end up with that happening, okay? All right, I can go to tune here and just make sure that it is centered. I think I calibrated the markings actually. No, I didn't. I don't know. Somehow it got messed up. I don't know what I think that these don't end up sticking. Maybe it's because we're not in like a service account, but I actually went back at one point and I modified the HADF markings to be reflective of the fact that the detector active is actually in more, but it didn't end up sticking for some reason. But anyways, all right. So let's go to Velox now and let's start getting an image. All right. So let me go back here. Okay, 225 is what we want to use when we actually get into S-Core. The reason for that is that we want to, that gives us the right, what's called Nyquist frequency. Okay, so we want to use 225. And now the only other thing we need to make sure of here is that our detector is not being saturated. Okay, so I'm adjusting my gain and my offset to make sure that this green line is nice and inside of the red and the dashed lines. Now one thing I can do too, I can move this over a little bit so I kind of have that really bright area kind of out of the way. Okay, the sample's been in here for a while as well, so it's nice and stable. There's not a lot of drift going on. All right, and we can stop this. Okay, and looks like we're pretty good on the focus. Again, we can use the piezo move Z to kind of blow this up a little more if we're, yeah, so we're close right here. And again, this is going to get tweaked when we start in S-Core. All right, but now we're ready to go to S-Core. So I'm going to find measurement, C1A1, and I like to use, before we do that, sorry, options. Okay, so yes, 17.9 milliradians. I don't think it will let you do, yeah, it won't let you do thousandths here, so you have to round up to 17.9. Okay. For the exposure time, I like to use a second. That seems to give more reliable measurements, okay, or ones that are more stable. So we will click Start and see what we get here. All right. So again, what we're seeing here is the image at Gaussian focus, the underfocused image, and the overfocus, or sorry, the underfocused probe shape and the overfocused probe shape. Okay. The other thing we can do as well, if we click probe state, okay, so we actually have about what is it now? Yeah, 155. Whoops. Click probe state, 155. Okay, so now this diagram right here, this is telling us a few things, okay? So the main thing here is it's telling us what we're being limited by, okay? So we can come back over to this and correct it. Now C1 and A1, these are the lower order aberrations because we have one. So with these, we can usually correct 100%, okay? So I'm going to start by correcting C1 here to, well, yeah, we can address this in a second. All right, we'll correct C1 to 100%. We should see this improve pretty quickly here. Usually there's a little overshoot initially. Is it auto updating? Ah, there we go. Okay, let me do auto update. Okay. Come on. There we go. All right. All right, now we have A1. Okay. Yep, there we go. Now we have C. We still have some A1 here. Whoops. All right, so basically we've got to get all of these numbers, C1, A1, A2, B2, and WD, which is beam tilt. These all have to get into the white. Okay, so right now the beam tilt is still high. So this you can think of as what's called off-axial comma. So we can do that to 100% as well, although usually this takes a few clicks here, right? So this is cut in half. So let's get that down. So with this guy, again, we want it so it's white. This is kind of like a beige now. I think really we should be able to get this less than, yeah, so 200 microrad. All right, we're getting there. All right, so this is good now. So we can go back to some of these other ones. So, all right, so it's saying we're limited by A1. So go ahead and correct A1. Okay, so now we're corrected by C1, which is, so A1 is twofold astigmatism, C1 is defocus, A2 is threefold astigmatism, B2 is what's called axial comma. Okay, so these are looking pretty good here. Now we're back to A1. So again, as you correct, certain aberrations, other ones become limiting potentially, but this looks pretty close here. All right, so I'm actually going to stop this. Okay, and what we are going to do now is go to the Tableau. Okay, so now the default for the Tableau is 40 millirad for the tilt. Okay, so basically it's going to take it through a bunch of tilts in different azimuthal directions. I believe that's the right term. Now we can run this at 40 and see what it looks like. This may be too high, but we'll see here. Okay, so we'll go ahead and click Start. Okay, so this is without tilting the beam, over focus or under focus, over focus. And now this is, I've tilted 40 millirad this direction, then 40 millirad this direction, then 40 millirad this direction, and again, under focus, over focus. So the reason that you tilt to these high angles is that it reveals the presence of the higher order aberrations more effectively, okay? And ultimately that's what we're trying to correct, right? We're trying to correct specifically C3, right? Which is the third order spherical aberration, right? But there's also some other ones that we're going to deal with specifically. But usually the third order ones are the ones that we're trying to eliminate here, okay? All right, so now it's doing, I think these are 20 millirads tilts. All right, so now it's going to give us a little table here in a second. Okay, and it's going to give us this guy. All right, so let's talk about what we get here, okay? So this faceplate here is basically an indication of how large we can make our convergence angle and still have an aberration free probe, okay? So basically, right now it's telling us we can only get to 13 milliradians, okay? And it's telling us what we're limited by is threefold astigmatism, which is A2, okay? So this isn't good, right? Really what we're trying to get here, we should be able to get this to around 25 milliradians, somewhere in there, okay? Now, if we come over here to this table, so this table is giving us a bunch of useful info, okay? So basically, the numbers that are yellow are basically too high, okay? These are aberrations that are not properly corrected and are excessively high here, okay? And so the main one here, we see C3, right? This is really high right now, or out of spec here, okay? Now, as far as once we get above the third order stuff, okay, usually it's not a good idea to try and correct these. Usually you only want to worry about anything that's, you know, level 3 or order 3 and below, okay? So we're not going to worry about D4, C5, and A5 right now, okay? So we'll go ahead and click, we'll click accept, okay? We'll create a undo point here. All right, and now we are going to do some corrections here. So let's start by, actually before we do that, okay, so let's come back to measurement here and let's try running this at 30 milliradians instead and just see what we get here. So when the corrector is properly tuned, what we should see here is over focus and under focus gives the same shape, okay, regardless of whether the beam is tilted or not. So we can kind of see now, I don't know if you remember when we did this with 40 millirad, but the probe shapes were pretty different, okay, between over and under focus, okay. So if it's giving you a fishy, something that's fishy there, you know, the first thing to do is drop that tilt down, the Tableau tilt down to something a little bit less. See, this looks a lot better here. I mean, just looking at the Ronchigram, it didn't look like we were that badly out of tune. So, I mean, that was kind of fishy just considering again, the Ronchigram appearance. All right, let's see what we get here. Okay. So better than we had, okay? All right, so it's telling us again, we're still limited by A2, and again, we still have some high C3. All right, so let's go ahead and click accept. All right, so let's go ahead and now with the lower order aberrations, correcting these at 100% is usually, you know, a good idea, okay? But once we get into the higher order stuff, you know, doing 100% is usually not a good approach. Okay, so with the C3, let's go ahead. We'll do 50%, and we'll do C3. Okay. All right. So now what we have to do here, and I'm do another undo point here. All right. So we're gonna go back here, and we're gonna manually tune this again. All right. So I'm gonna start here by let's take out the stem detector, and we're gonna increase the camera length back to 285. All right, I'm going to turn diffraction off. All right, so we see the beam tilt is off. Manual correction, beam tilt. Now you may wonder, how did the beam tilt get kind of thrown off this much? So this is actually not necessarily probably, I mean, we would never image with the beam tilt off that much in practice, but this is not necessarily problematic as far as the tuning goes. At least this was what was explained to me by a applications person. So it's nothing to really worry about, but we'll go ahead and correct it anyway. All right, and again, we're using user beam shift. And now we're going to go ahead and I'll do eccentric focus again here. We'll see where we're at. All right, we're a little bit off there. All right, and I will push diffraction, so we'll see the Ronchigram again. Okay, center with diffraction alignment. Bump this up to 150. All right, this looks fairly close. We can move it probably a little bit to the left, but the Ronchigram itself looks pretty good here. All right, so let's move this here a little bit. Yeah, so just looking at the Ronchigram, this looks really, really pretty good here. Okay, so hopefully, you know, we're going to go back and we'll do an A1, a C1 A1 sequence here, and but this is what we want. So basically we're seeing like a 6-fold symmetry in the outer angles here and a nice flat region in the middle, okay? And this is what we're trying to get here. So I would be, whoops, I want to go to the 50, my bad. I would be shocked if when we do this, we don't get a nice result with the Tableau, but we will see anyway. All right, drop the camera length back down to 91. Detector back in. And actually, I should show you what happens here while it runs the tuning. Okay, so yeah, I didn't even have to mess with A1 and ATA1 and ATB2. Okay, it wasn't even necessary. So, all right. So let's go ahead here, click C1A1 and start. All right. So again, same we're limited by, now it's saying C1. All right, we'll deal with beam tilt first here. Okay, so we'll put that back. right, so that's a little better here. All right, C1. All right, so now we're limited by A1. All right, now it's saying we're limited by A2. Give it a second here. Sometimes it needs a couple readings. Now A1. Yeah, I mean, when these get really low, there's a lot of fluctuation here. So, and again, because there's signal to noise, this is still a little high. So bring that down here. We'll get that a little less than, whoa, come on, go down. There we go. Okay. All right, so we're looking pretty good now. All right, we are good. We'll correct A1 here. All right, we are good to go here. So we will leave that there and go to Tableau. And we got to punch in 30 there. So now here, I'm going to center this guy. And now watch what happens here when I run this so you can kind of get an appreciation for this. Okay, so as it tilts, you're going to see that disc kind of shift, right? Just like that. So a shift, a tilt in the beam equates to a shift in diffraction space. And we'll see what we got here. All right, let's see what we got. Come on. A little better. All right. So now it's saying we've got some S3. All right, but our C3 went down quite a bit. Okay, so that's good. All right, so we'll accept this. Okay, create a restore point. We'll correct 50% of S3. Okay, and then so it was also saying back here we got some A2. So we'll do 50% of A2 as well. All right, and let's come back here. So now I think if I could do the beam tilt again, but I think it's just going to end up throwing it off. So I'm just going to leave that alone here. Okay, so, but we can take a look at the Ronchigram. And we'll go back up to 285. And take a look here. All right, so that looks okay. Let's find a new spot. Okay, so I can see pretty clearly here that I have got some twofold here. Okay, so I'm going to start by manual, and I'm going to do A1, ATA1. Yep, so, yep, right about there. Okay, so that looks pretty good right there. Yeah, so ATA1 looks good. And then just going back and forth with a focus here, it really doesn't look like there's a lot of B2. And again, that was, we saw that with the Tableau. So yeah, so just looking at this. So now if I had to eyeball this here, so 53 million, yeah. So I mean, just looking at this, we should have a good phase plate. So all right, well, let's see what we got here. Put the 50 back in. All right, that's clearly not centered. All right, there we go. Back to 91. Detector in. All right. And let's see here. Let's do eccentric focus here. All right, and then, yeah, it looks pretty good. The Ronchigram looks like we're nice and blown up here. I'm using the piezo Z here to get the blow up. All right, we're good here. Measurement C1A1, and we'll start again. Again, we should be able to get this phase plate out to about 25 milliradians, okay? All right, so this is a lot less than it was. Go ahead and correct that. All right, correct defocus. Sometimes there's a little overshoot when you do the defocus. Now, one thing looks like maybe, I wonder if we're getting a little bit of, let me stop this for a second, go to Velox here. Okay, so we got a little bit of that super bright stuff in there. So let me get that kind of out of the way. Okay. I don't think we're getting any clipping there, but you want to make sure you're not. All right, so now we're limited by still A1. Still C1. All right, so this is still a little high, so. All right, so now it's saying we're limited by A2. So now A2, I don't want to do 100% corrections with. That's a higher order aberration, so usually with that, I'll be a little more conservative here. Maybe we could use 50% actually, though. But usually doing 100% with those is not a good idea. You end up going the opposite direction. It doesn't converge the right way. Come on. All right. A1 and so this is now back up again. Nope, no, it's not. All right, we'll see if this stays kind of stable here, and then we'll kind of stop it if it is. All right, so I think let me check one more measurement here. All right, we're good to go here, so we'll stop. All right, do Tableau. Whoops, sorry, 30 milliradians. There we go. Now that's what we need to be seeing, something like that. Okay, so now we're getting real close here. Okay, and so we can see what it's telling us now is we're limited by threefold astigmatism. Okay, and so this is a good result basically. We could stop here if we wanted to. I'm going to go ahead and click accept. I'm going to set a restore point. We'll come back here. Okay, so basically all of our third order aberrations are good. We don't need to mess with those. If we wanted to try and fix this a little bit more, so let's do see, last time we tried 50%, so let's try 30% correction here of A2, and we will come back to the Ronchigram. Again, I'm not going to bother looking at the probe image to correct beam tilt. Insert the detector. All right, looks pretty good right there. So in principle, if we go back to the phase plate here, okay, at 200 kilovolts, basically anything, if you get this up to 20 milliradians, you will get 80 picometer resolution. Okay, so basically we have a good enough tuning now, in theory, to get us sub 80 picometers resolution. Okay, just based on what the phase plate is telling us. All right, so let's take a look here. Yeah, this looks good. There's really not much I can do with this in terms of course A1 and course B2. So, all right, so we'll leave it alone. And again, as you do iterations, right, the amount of tuning you should have to do should be, of course, less each time if you're doing it correctly. All right, so that looks good right there. Drop this back to 91. All right, let's take a look at the stem image, make sure we're in a good spot, and we are. All right, so we'll go to this guy, go to C1A1, and we'll start. All right, so we got to correct beam tilt again. can bring this down a little bit more. If I look back here, so our last measurement was 120 nanometers. So we want to see if we can get that less than what we were before, because according to, that's what was limiting us. What do we got here? C1. Yeah, I don't know why it does this with the focus, why it does this overshoot initially, but it comes back. A1. This is looking pretty good here. Let's see if this will go down a little bit more. $16. All right, let's see if it's stable here. All right, do one more measurement and see. Okay, we're going to stop it there. All right, let's run the Tableau, and we should get a little bit better result than this. Maybe stretch this out to 25 millirad, and then we will call it a day. Okay, so yeah, you can see this number was already less than we had before. All right, so we stretched it out a little bit more, but what's interesting here though is it's telling us that now we're no longer limited by threefold, but now we're actually limited by D4, which is what's called a lobe aberration, I believe. And this isn't something you want to try to correct. Believe me, I've tried fudging with these fourth order um, aberrations, and it's just not worth it. Okay, so this is fine. Okay, 24 milliradians, this is fine. Okay, this is perfect. Now, if we play with this a little bit more, we could probably stretch this to 25 or 26 milliradians. But again, in practice, usually we use about 20 millirad when we do the imaging. So this is fine. This will get us sub 80 picometers resolution, no sweat at all. Okay, so I'm not going to mess with this, right? When you're ahead at the table, right, walk away. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click accept. Okay, I'll make a restore point, and yeah, so we can see here, right, these are all still zeroed. Okay, and I am going to now save my alignment file. Okay, so I'm actually going to rewrite this. I loaded this 200 kVUF, and I'm going to rename this as something else. 200 kV RSC for research service centers where I work. Put UFRSC in there. No, RSC looks better. All right, We'll just call it RSC. Okay. We'll click save. Date and time. All right. I'm going to delete this file. Because this is, yep, okay. Anyways, so I saved the alignments in this file, okay? And that's basically it. So if you have any questions here, please let me know. But again, just wanted to make sure that I went over this with you guys again, and lots of nuances that needed to be covered that I didn't do effectively the first time around. So did a much better job this time, I think. All right, so again, if you have questions, comments, please let me know. And again, I hope to get to some more videos real soon. Walk in here and to the room and stop the video on my computer. All right, thanks, guys. I'll see you soon.